Ah, Smart Water, now in a sleek can.
This feels cool, literally.
Perfect for social gatherings and on the go.
Should I start wearing turtlenecks?
One sip at a time, friend. Smart Water cans, for those with a taste for taste. Get yours today.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is former New Jersey Senator Bob Torricelli, who served in both the House and the Senate. Bob Torricelli earned degrees both from Rutgers University and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. During his time in Congress, he authored the Cuban Democracy Act of 1992. He is a consistent opponent of authoritarian regimes, not just in the Middle East, but also in our own hemisphere. And I'm delighted that he can join us today. Senator, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
So before we get into international politics, we learned through Elon Musk's Doge program that Yale and Harvard, Brown University, and other universities who have these massive endowments have been getting tens of millions of dollars from U.S. taxpayers. And you had a great idea as to how this situation should be addressed. And then days later, I saw the administration doing precisely what you had recommended. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, Roger, there should be some national debate about the ability of institutions, especially universities, to accumulate not millions, but billions of dollars of endowments, pay no taxes, while availing themselves of federally financed student loans and government subsidies. They accumulate this money, but seem loath to spend it on public purposes or on their own students. I think it's a policy that needs to be revisited. Under what I'm understanding to be President Trump's proposal for the new tax bill, at a certain level of endowment, I think he's proposing $200 billion, a tax would apply, not a large tax, but I think he's talking about 2% on the endowments over that level. I actually believe it should go further. If a university like my own alma mater of Harvard accumulates hundreds of billions of dollars, but still charges students $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in tuition and forces them on to government-backed student loans, there's a problem. And I think they should have a choice. Use the money, subsidize your students, use it for your own research, notwithstanding the government, or contribute to the public treasury. It appears to me we're going to have that debate at long last.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's move right into the news of the last 10 days. What is your reaction to the president's trip to the Middle East and the various announcements there? Obviously, he knows how to do business. $1 trillion in investment from the Saudis, 1.4 from the UAE. He announces a $200 billion deal with Qatar. What is your thinking?
Well, we have, since the Second World War, been in this economic strategy where we have massive trade deficits, and the dollars are recycled back into the United States by buying government bonds. And we've been content that somehow that reached an equilibrium. It didn't. Those dollars do not go for naught. They are enormous leverage over the United States and the American Treasury. That is not a balanced trade relationship. There are two ways to balance our trade deficits with our appetite for foreign goods. People either buy American products, which they should, and clearly the Trump administration is working on that by imposing tariffs until we enter into balanced trade relationships, or direct investment in the United States. Take those dollar surpluses that nations are accumulating and put them in the United States to build our own country, create jobs here. We have witnessed in the last several months the first part of that strategy, requiring countries to have purchase of American goods for balance. What you saw last week is the other part of the strategy, requiring them to start investing in the United States. And those are large numbers. If you're approaching $1 trillion worth of Saudi investment in plant and equipment in America, you're going to have an impact.
I know that you are a skeptic when it comes to honest negotiations with the Iranian regime. You and I think agreed that I saw very slightly different statements from the president, the vice president, and his special negotiator, Steve Witkoff. The president, I think, has made it pretty clear that while he may be open to letting the Iranian regime have nuclear power for the purpose of producing electricity, that he is not willing to let them have enriched uranium with which they could develop nuclear weapons. That seems to me to be a very difficult negotiation. How do you think that will play out?
I think it's difficult, and as you suggested, it's hard to know what to believe because there are different statements coming out of the administration. It could be a good policy. It could not be. The Iranians have one nuclear power plant. They do not need to be enriching uranium. They do not need to be even processing uranium. Economics would dictate, good business would dictate, is you have one plant. Indeed, if you were to quadruple it and someday have 4, if you were to have 10, it would not make economic sense to be producing uranium domestically. You'd be importing it. It's smarter, it's cheaper, it's good business, which raises the question, if you're going to have one plant or someday have 10, why are you choosing to enrich uranium at all? It would raise suspicions that the real intent isn't nuclear power at all. It's to have the option, if not now, at some point, of a nuclear weapon. In my judgment, the right policy for the administration would be dismantle your nuclear weapons program, and if you're telling the truth that you want a civilian nuclear power project, enter into a long-term agreement, even with the Russians. We do. We buy from the Russians. Enter a long-term agreement and import the material from them or someone.
Do you think that the sanctions that President Trump put in place on Iran during his first term were effective?
I think we're only actually having a discussion with Iranians about potentially dismantling their nuclear power systems because of the sanctions in the first Trump administration. They were probably the most effective sanctions on a foreign rogue regime in history, more than South Africa, more than on Rhodesia, more than on Russia. They were almost airtight, but for some oil escaping, particularly to China. But they did the trick. They crippled the regime. They made it difficult for the regime to send money to Hezbollah and Hamas and other terrorist organizations, and it fomented internal dissent. I genuinely regret in the Biden administration, and I say it with regret because I remain, and will always be a Democrat, the release of billions of dollars of sanctioned funds that were held by the United States and other nations, returning those monies to Iran, relieved economic pressure internally, and it certainly contributed to the ability of the Iranian regime to fund terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Hezbollah, around the globe. It was a profound mistake, but it's a reality. Now the question is there enough economic pressure on the regime, and I think there probably is, to force them back to the table and dismantle their weapons capability?
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy red bumps start on my arm, then my back, sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere, and it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Coming up shortly, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, the chairwoman of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Classified Documents regarding the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. You're not going to want to miss this because she is going to bring us news. She is earning her mark in the House as a real fighter for her unapologetic style and her bold legislative reform agenda. We're very pleased to have her. We're continuing our conversation with Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey. Bob, let me ask you this. The president announced when he was in the Middle East that he was lifting sanctions on Syria, and he was suggesting that Syria may someday join the Abraham Accords. Let me hear your views on this.
Well, I suspect we're a long way from them joining the Abraham Accords, given the nature of their government and what is a deepening rift, not a lessening rift, with some of the Arab nations because of events in Gaza. I think as a practical matter, it's no matter how hard the president may try, and I admire him for trying, bridging that gap as long as the Israeli offensive remains in Gaza is probably impossible. For an Arab government now to reapproach with Israel would be at enormous internal political risk. The other part of your question, of course, is approaching the Syrian government the right thing to do. I think it has risk. We really don't know a lot about who is in this coalition. We don't know a lot about the leadership. The current president is a former al-Qaeda member. That in and of itself raises suspicions. On the other hand, even though it's a risk, I think the president's probably done the right thing. Trying to bring Syria into the orbit of moderate Arab states to try to at least moderate their behavior with Israel, to open communication, to keep them from radicalizing further. While it has risks, I think is undoubtedly worth a try. I think the president did the right thing.
It never hurts to talk. I agree with that, but we cannot ignore the mass slaughter of Christians in Syria, and we cannot ignore the status of the regime there and the radical nature of the regime. I was not a big fan of Assad, needless to say. On the other hand, as we saw in Libya, what came after the toppling of Gaddafi was far, far worse. I pray that we are not seeing the same thing in Syria, but I think perhaps, that we are. all politics is local, therefore I cannot resist. But before we get there, my wife, as you know, is a proud Cuban American, and she suggested that I ask you this question. What should the administration's current policy towards the Cuban regime be?
Well, I have spent a lot of my life in dealing with American policy towards Cuba, and I have to start by admitting we were fundamentally wrong. Most of us who were involved in the Democrat-Republican coalition to reform Cuba believed that when Castro died and his brother Raul left the scene, that somehow the regime would start to moderate. It didn't. It hasn't. There's no reason to believe that it will. It remains hostile. It is not fomenting revolution in the hemisphere the way it did, but I don't think that's a change of philosophy. It's simply because of their desperate economic circumstances, which to me is the best argument for keeping the current economic sanctions in place until there's a change of government. It doesn't have to become a Jeffersonian democracy. They can choose their own form of government as long as it respects human rights and is not aggressive towards the United States, our interests, or other governments in the hemisphere. But there's no reason to believe at the moment that we're any closer to that goal. So I don't see any reason for the United States to change its policies.
Yeah, in fact, I would make the case that previously they were a client state of Russia. Today they appear to me to be a client state of China. We know that China has a sophisticated spy station in Cuba. We also know that they have missiles in Cuba. Now, technically they're defensive missiles, but military experts tell me with a few simple changes, they could become offensive missiles. And, of course, there are no civil liberties. There are no religious rights. There are no free speech. This is a police state, a vicious police state. And the hoped-for liberalization post-Castro has not taken place. So I agree with you. I think the sanctions are absolutely necessary. All right, let's go to the Garden State very quickly. You have hot Republican primary and Democrat primary. Well, I saw that President Donald Trump endorsed Jack Ciattarelli for the Republican nomination. I think the Republicans, the president's endorsement in a primary is determinative. I think Ciattarelli will now win this primary. Thought he was going to win previously, but now with the imprimatur of Donald Trump, I am certain of it. What's your outlook for the Democrat nomination? I'm not asking you to endorse anybody. I'm just asking for your analysis.
Well, almost from the beginning, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill has maintained a lead. It frankly has surprised me that her lead has either maintained or strengthened in recent weeks, because I thought there have been strong challenges on the far left from Mayor Ras Baraka and a little more centrist from Mayor Fulop. And Steve Sweeney maintains has a strong base in southern New Jersey. I've expected the race to tighten. As you know, the primary rules in New Jersey went through a historic change in the last year. The ability of county organizations to endorse a candidate and give them favorable ballot position, which almost always assured that the party choice would win the nomination. That was ended by the federal courts. These candidates are all now listed in the same ballot, and I think we all thought that meant that the candidate primarily endorsed by the party wouldn't have this advantage. But Mikey Sherrill is proving us wrong. She's a strong contender with a lead.
All right, I want to thank my guest, former Senator Bob Torricelli of New Jersey, for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.